Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, guys, whether you're watching me on YouTube or on Rumble. And I have good news for the followers of Syriana Analysis, the independent journalists who were deplatformed from YouTube last week. It seems that most of them actually have been back and reinstated by YouTube after huge pressure and noise have been done by very, let's say, famous journalists on X who created a backlash against YouTube, and this is good news. However, I always encourage you again to register to Rumble just in case. If YouTube deplatforms this YouTube channel based on false allegations such as hate speech. On this channel, especially I myself, I don't hate against any particular group, religion, ethnicity. On this channel, we discuss ideas, we discuss politics, we discuss geopolitics, and also sometimes we discuss ideologies. Some of these ideologies are more toxic than the others. For example, if you have been following the Syriana Analysis coverage, you know quite well that I have criticized Wahhabism, the Muslim Brotherhood, Salafism, and those are ideologies in Islam. Unfortunately, some people confused my criticism of these radical ideologies with Islamophobia. I am here today. I defend the Palestinians, I defend the Muslims, I defend the Christians, and I defend the Jews. I don't hate against particular groups. I criticize ideologies if these ideologies, in my opinion, are toxic and causing destruction of the minds and also the destruction of the people's homes and nations. Therefore, it's very important at the beginning of this live streaming to make a disclaimer that this live streaming will discuss controversial ideas, and I am in no way or shape hating against a particular group and especially against the Jewish people as a group. Unlike the allegations of the Zionists that equating Zionism or anti Zionism with anti Semitism, I don't buy into that definition. And I just want to make another point that recently I personally helped a Jewish Syrian friend of mine who returned from the United States to Syria to reopen the Jewish cathedral and the Jewish, what they call the cemetery, to visit his place of his ancestors and to pray in his cathedral. Therefore, I'm in no way or shape against the Jewish people at all. However, if someone comes from 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 kilometers away or 10,000 kilometers away and tells me, my book tells me that you have to leave your apartment because 3,500 years ago, this is what is written in my book, then I think there is going to be some dispute about it. This is the point that I'm trying to make here. And this is especially for those who follow Syrian analysis, especially among the secret services who are documenting these videos and waiting for me to say something. And I'm not avoiding anything against my conviction. This is my true conviction. I believe that the Jewish people are integral part of the Middle East. We have Jewish people in Syria, we have Jewish people in Lebanon, we have Jewish people in Iraq, in Palestine, in Morocco, in Algeria, in Egypt. And the problem started after the creation of the Zionist state. And this was not a problem of the Middle East or North Africa. Anti-Semitism was inherently was a problem, a European problem against the Jews, not the Middle Easterners. And the proof of that is that the Jews lived among their brothers and sisters for a long time, and they were not persecuted by any other religious groups. In the contrary, when they were persecuted, for example, in Portugal and in Spain, they escaped to Morocco and to Algeria, and they found there a safe haven. And similarly, when there was persecution and killing against the Jews during Second World War, many of the Jewish refugees arrived to Palestine and found safe haven there. However, what happened afterwards is a completely different story. So, today in this episode, I'm going to discuss with you also why Israel is bombing Syria, because this is the title of today's episode, and how is this the bombing campaign against Syria is part, or probably is part, of the greater Israel project. So brace yourself, because we're going to discuss serious issues today, and it is mind-blowing for some. However, it is non-information for many others. Now, I receive many questions actually every day. Why Syria doesn't respond, and why Syria receives these blows from Israel, and what is the Syrian army is doing, and why they're not retaliating, this and that. And I think it's important for the people to get some historical context on this, especially that in the 1948, when the state of Israel has been established, Syria participated in the war against Israel alongside other Arabic countries. However, because most of the Arabic countries were under occupation, whether by the French or by the Brits or by the other colonial powers in the region, they didn't have the opportunity before 1948 to have their strong national armies. They were under occupation. So this war was a complete failure for the Arabic armies who marched against Israel in a bid to liberate Palestine again. Now, after 48, there was another major war, which was the 1967 war. In 1967 war, Syria was attacked by Israel and lost the Golan Heights. Now, when the Golan Heights were occupied by Israel, Israel issued a national law annexing the Golan Heights and considering it part of the Israeli territories. So Israel started to expand beyond the partition lines of the UN Security Council resolution. They occupied the Golan Heights, they occupied Sinai, they occupied the West Bank, they occupied the Gaza Strip, and this was the first major big expansion of Israel. But you have to remember that in 1967 war, Israel had an enormous backing by the United States, by the UK, and other colonial powers, unlike Syria, which, although Syria received backing from the Soviet Union, but it was in no way or shape as the amount and the capabilities that Israel had back then. But during this time, in the Arab world there was Egypt. Egypt was one of the biggest Arabic armies, most capable, and during this time, Syria and Egypt were considered the main powers opposing the Israelis. However, in 1973, when Hafez al-Assad and Anwar al-Sadat secretly planned on waging an offensive war against Israel to liberate the territories they lost during the 67 war, during this war, Syria liberated the Golan Heights, and this was, let's say, a very hype moment for the Syrians. However, Anwar Sadat, he stopped the war in the middle when he started advancing in the Sinai. And this gave Israel the opportunity, because Anwar Sadat said, okay, I advanced now, and I'm giving now the opportunity for diplomacy. And he sent messages to the United States that it is willing to sign a peace treaty with Israel in exchange for giving back the Sinai to Egypt. And the Americans were very happy about it, but they had also other conditions. For example, neutralizing the Egyptian threat against Israel completely in exchange for a few $1 billion per year. And secondly, that they have to kick out all the Soviet army and the Soviet equipment and the Soviet advisors from Egypt and replace them with Americans and American weaponry and American advisors. So Anwar Sadat completely kicked out the Soviets as well. He signed the peace treaty, which was the Camp David Accords in 78, and he kicked out the Soviets, and he brought the United States to the most important, in my opinion, country in the region opposing the Israeli occupation forces. So the Americans expanded their influence and leverage through the Anwar al-Sadat and through Egypt on the Middle East and North Africa, thanks to this Anwar al-Sadat's deal, which is the Camp David Accords. And up until this moment, everybody is like baffled why Egypt isn't doing anything when there are massacres happening in the Gaza Strip. The reason because they have security agreements with Israel. They have security agreements with the United States in exchange for a few $1 billion per year. And despite that, Egyptian economy is crumbling, and it's a okay. I will ban one of the commentators who is. I don't want to be honest with you. Somebody is coming here and using just the F words. Anyways, so um, Egypt at the moment is dependent on foreign aid from the United States, and it has strict security deals with the US and Israel. Therefore, they cannot act. They have the biggest military in the Middle East, bigger than Israel, and it's the biggest Arab army in the region. And recently, they had a big, let's say, show for their military. And if you see this, I mean, there are 100 million people in Egypt, right? And despite that, they don't do anything because of the Camp David Accords. So when Egypt left the Arab-Israeli conflict, Syria remained alone in this conflict, because afterwards also Jordan joined the peace agreement again with Wadi Araba agreement with Israel. So Syria was isolated in the region. Saudis do not want to fight. Jordanians do not want to fight. Egyptians do not want to fight. So who is going to do the fighting? And because the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran in 79, during the same time that when Egypt signed the Camp David Accord, Syria found in Iran a strategic ally to counter the Israeli and American hegemony in the region. However, I'm being very honest with you. Up until this moment, despite the strategic relationship between Syria and Iran is not ready to come and fight alongside the Syrians against the Israeli occupation forces. This is Syria's war. Yes, Iran provides aid, security, military aid, but in no way or shape matches the aid and security aid and military aid that Israel receives from the United States. And similarly is with Russia. Russia doesn't give Syria all the military equipment it needs, and Syria doesn't have the financial means to pay anyways for such. Since last year, Israel received $28 billion of security and military aid packages from the United States. How can Syria match this? It's impossible, especially in the context that the Americans occupy at the moment the Syria's oil fields and also block the trade routes. So the situation was very volatile for Syria. Syria cannot alone as a very smaller economy compared to Israel to match the Israeli superiority, and especially with the complete support of the United States to the Israelis. Now, I'm not going to get into so much details, but nowadays Syria is coming under constant attack by the Israelis, and this has accelerated, especially after 2013. Now, in 2011, the CIA engineered this regime change war for the same reasons and for the exact same reasons to weaken the axis of resistance. So to weaken Hezbollah and to weaken the Palestinian factions, to end this Palestinian conflict once and for all. This was in the same context of what's happening now in Gaza, and the same context what's happening in southern Lebanon. But many people were unfortunately persuaded and fooled by the press, thinking that what happened in Syria is a revolution. It was a neocon Zionist project in Syria to destroy Syria, to weaken its army. I mean, what explains, do you have any other explanation why in the first days of the so-called Syrian revolution, these so-called rebels attacked the air bases of Syria? I mean, how can the Syrian army use air defense systems against the rebels? They don't have an air force. So why did they attack the air defense systems? There are countless of videos of these rebels who were, for sure, they received maps and instructions from the US, from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from Israel to attack these air bases and to destroy the air defenses of Syria. So people need to get really this context into consideration before. Syria lived 13 years of incredible big war. Syria lost 500,000 people during the discourse of this war. Syria was fought by over 120,000 multinational terrorists from all around the world. This was the costliest CIA operation in the recent history of the CIA. So there is no other place that the CIA dumped as much as weapons in the world as in Syria. In the late 70s and the 80s, they did similar thing in Afghanistan, but in Syria, it was over 120,000 multinational terrorists. Can you imagine that? And in this context, people have to ask themselves this question: where are these so-called jihadists now from what's happening in Palestine? It's not like I'm calling them to go to Palestine because they are nothing but a contract army for the US, but where are they? I think these are legitimate questions, right? People to ask. So in this context now, in 2013, why the Israeli attacks accelerated against Syria? Accelerated because Syria lost its deterrent weapon. In 2013 and 2014, the MI6, the CIAs, the Saudis, the Turks, the Qataris, they were all involved in this plot against Syria. They wanted to strip Syria of its chemical weapon program. So they orchestrated false flag chemical attack in Ghouta in 2013, August 2013, and they blamed the Syrian government. And Obama said that he's going to come and bomb Syria, and he was very close of obliterating many of the Syrian army positions and what they call regime headquarters. He was ready to pull the trigger, just like he did in Libya and killed Gaddafi, right? And therefore, there was a diplomatic solution to strip Syria of its chemical weapons with the mediation of the Russians in order to spare Syria of a foreign intervention, basically to completely destroy the country, just like they did in Libya. So since then, Syria was stripped of its deterrent weapon. And when I say deterrent weapon, this is a weapon that you don't use against your enemy. You deter your enemy from attacking you because you have a deterrent weapon, just like the nuclear weapons, right? So Syria doesn't have now a deterrent weapon, doesn't have strong air defenses, unfortunately. They have still using the old S-200, the Buks, and some of the Panzer S-1s. And I'm not sure if the S-300s are operational in the country. So Syria is exposed. So opening a front against Israel with Israel having F-35s, the F-16s, it's going to be very devastating, right? In this conflict, if it engages in this conflict. However, I have a very clear conviction: it's not enough for any player A to not want a war. Let's say Syria is a player A, and Syria doesn't want an all-out war against Israel, right? However, if Israel wants this all-out war, can Syria say no? Let's suppose that Israel started carpet bombing Damascus. Will Syria say, I don't want to fight? I don't think so. So this is where we are at the moment. We are in October the 9th, 2024. And I think in the past 9 to 10 years, the type and the nature of the attacks by Israel were mostly, let's say, what they call surgical attacks against certain convoys or certain military installations. But for the first time, yesterday, which was Tuesday, Israel bombed a residential area, killing many civilians, including children and women. This is unprecedented in the past 10 to 12 years. Right. And this is what I wrote in this case. And I think it's very important for us to have, like, it was very important to have all this context before explaining to you why this could be a game changer now for Syria and for Israel itself as well. So, the Israeli assault on Damascus today, and this was yesterday, is different in nature, and Syria must respond with a new approach. Let me be clear, I'm not here to philosophize to you or to the decision makers, and I'm not calling for violence. I'm simply analyzing the situation and connecting the dots based on my humble understanding and experience. Today's attack on Damascus was nothing short of a full scale terrorist assault on a residential neighborhood, killing innocent civilians. The message Israel is sending to the axis of resistance is crystal clear. if you persist in linking the Gaza and Lebanese fronts, Israel will escalate violently, destabilize Damascus, and force the Syrian army into direct retaliation, which means dragging Syria fully into this war. Furthermore, Israel has mobilized the Al Golani or Jolani, this is Abu Muhammad al Jolani's Al Nusra Front gangs in Idlib, using the CIA and MI6 assets to launch an offensive on Syrian army positions in the north. And I just want to show you where the these Al Nusra gangs could attack the Syrian army. And I'm receiving reports from Syria that this attack could be as early as next week. So this is the map of control over Syria from Syria. What's the name of this website? Syria.liveuamap.com. So this is the map of control over Syria. And as you can see, all this bombing campaign by the Syrian army air force, it has accelerated on the front line. Why? Because they know that these al-Nusra Front Al-Qaeda elements are going to wage an offensive against the Syrian army positions. So the red is the Syrian army positions, and my information says that they are going to attack from this axis here. You see these areas? They're going to come from these areas here and here. So in these areas, you have Syrian army, Russian positions, and national defense forces. And this is what they're trying to do, and probably try to cut the M5 highway again. So this is the plan at the moment, to provoke a Nusra Qaeda attack against the Syrian army positions in the north, and at the same time to accelerate the bombing campaign of Israel itself on Damascus, with the hope of devastating the Syrian army, overstretching it, and engaging it in a direct confrontation with Israel. Israel wants for Syria to join this conflict because Israel, at the moment, after October 7, Hezbollah intervened and said that in ceasefire in Gaza, we stop shooting. So they linked these two front lines together. So the front line of Gaza and the front line of Syria are front line of Gaza and front line of Lebanon are interconnected now. Israel said multiple times to Hezbollah that I want to separate these two front lines. You have to stop shooting on the Lebanese, on the Israeli settlements, and I want to make a separate deal with you. Hezbollah said no, I don't want to make a separate deal with you. The deal is in Gaza. Ceasefire in Gaza. We stop shooting. So Netanyahu went and he assassinated all the leadership of Hezbollah with the hope that Hezbollah would be deterred, but he was not successful up until this moment. So Israel is sending this message to Syria now and to Iran and to the entire axis of resistance that if you don't separate the Lebanese front from the Gaza front, I will myself open a third front in Syria. And we know that Syria is devastated. It has lived 13 years of war. It is living under harsh economic sanctions. And I'm going to add another burden on you, this time by bombing Damascus. And at the same time, I'm going to encourage the Al Qaeda elements in the north to attack the Syrian army positions through my allies in the United States, in the UK, against the Syrian army positions. So this is what Israel is basically doing, right? So if we see all this situation from this context, it makes all sense, right? I will go back to my article which I wrote on X yesterday, and just a second. So let me see again. Yes. So, as I have already warned in a previous post, all the talk of a political settlement is nothing but a smokescreen. Israel has no intention of halting its war machine now. Its ultimate goal remains unchanged: to annihilate the Palestinian cause once and for all, to weaken Hezbollah, and to further isolate Syria. And I ask here two questions. I say, does anyone seriously believe that the Zionists invested 13 years in the Syrian war just to let Damascus come out victorious in the end? Why do you think US occupation forces are entrenched at Al Tanf border crossing and along the eastern shore of the Euphrates? And I say they are in Al Tanf to support Israel militarily, technologically, and with intelligence when the southern front ignites. And they are on the eastern shore of the Euphrates not only to block Syria's access to its oil fields, but also to pave the way for the establishment of a Kurdish state. So, have you ever questioned or wondered where Israel's borders truly begin and end? According to arch Zionist theorists, their borders stretch from the Nile to the western shore of the Euphrates. Now, under this vision, who controls the eastern shore of the Euphrates? If on the western shore it's going to be a Zionist state, then who is controlling the eastern bank of the Euphrates? According to the Greater Israel Plan, it's meant to be Kurdistan. So, do you see where this all heading? I'm going to go back to the map just to show you the two arguments and 2 points that I made here in this article. So this is the map of control. This is where the Americans are occupying this green. This is the Al Tanf border crossing. From here, the United States gives intelligence, military, logistical support to Israel. So many times, the Israeli warplanes they come from, for example, Tel Aviv. They fly over Jordan, and they come here to the green area where the Americans are. And the Americans basically they use their electronic jamming technologies to blind the Syrian air defenses and the radars. And from here, the Israeli war fighter jets they fly to the Syrian deserts and start bombing Aleppo or in Homs or in Hama. You see, so this is why the Americans are here. And in a case of an all-out war with Israel, rest assured that the Americans will try to expand to the south and try to encircle the Syrian army position. So the presence of the American forces here basically is first to block Syria's trade routes with its neighborhood, but also to give intelligence support and military support to Israel in case of an all-out war. Now, the second question that I asked. So, according to the Greater Israel Plan, and these Zionist theorists say that their borders stretch between the Nile. The Nile is here, and it goes all the way to the Euphrates. And the Euphrates is this. This is the Euphrates, right? You see the Euphrates. This is the Euphrates, and according to their plan, they say that on the eastern bank of the Euphrates, where the American occupation forces are in this yellow area, right? So, who is going to be in charge of this place? Who is going to control this? According to them, it's Kurdistan. And who are the proxies of the US in this area who occupy this area alongside the Americans? They are the so called Syrian Democratic Forces, who are nothing but the YPG, the Kurdish forces. So now it makes all sense when you understand geography and you read this and connect these dots. The Americans are here in the yellow area in order to encourage the establishment of a Kurdistan for the sake of the future Greater Israel. And they are here in this area to again give intelligence support to the Israelis in case of an all out war with Syria. So, if I want to go back to the article, because I'm going to end with my conclusion. I say, returning to today's aggression on Damascus, if we analyze Israel's offensive patterns, their intentions, and the dominance they currently enjoy in escalation, coupled with Iran's limited participation in the ongoing conflict, if Syria doesn't establish strong deterrence immediately through direct military means and with substantial Iranian support, Israel's next step could be to flatten entire buildings in the heart of Damascus. Again, I'm not here to frighten you or call for violence. I'm here to tell you the truth from my perspective. Israel has already decided on greater war, and the axis of resistance faces monumental challenges that can be overcome only through united, decisive action against the US Israeli axis. So, what do you think about my explanation about this case? Does it make sense for you in the context of the ongoing conflict in the region? Do you think that Israel is seeking for a greater Israel project in the region, or they will only be satisfied with from the river to the sea, which is a complete occupation of historic Palestine? Now, if I want to show you the map of the Greater Israel, this is the Greater Israel, as you see, the blue one, right? So they have to occupy parts of Egypt and parts of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, half of Iraq, basically, and three-quarters of Syria and Lebanon completely. And this is not something um, like a conspiracy theory, you know. They are actually Zionist, art Zionist theologians and these Zionist evangelicals in the United States who preach about this project. Really forgot the name of this person. If you please remind me his name again in the comments below while I'm showing you this video. Take a look what he says.
God promised the Jewish people these lands, one half of modern day Egypt, all of Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Kuwait, and 3/4 of Saudi Arabia. This is going to become a reality in the millennial reign when Jesus Christ rules the world from Jerusalem with a rod of iron. This is Israel right now, and this is what will happen whenever the Messiah comes back.
And he says, like, sooner or later this happened. So basically, we are being told that we are going to be kicked out of our land soon because God wants that.
John Hagee's one of the biggest figures. He's invited to White House events. He's invited to U.S. embassy openings. Imagine a college kid on campus is saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We're told that's genocide. This guy is proposing wiping out multiple countries in the Middle East. He's a favorite of the Republican Party.
Yes.
And by the way, this is the most important point. He's an anti-Semite.
They are pro-Israel, but they hate the Jews.
Camille, thank you, Habibi, for reminding me his name. Yes, Pastor John Hagee. I hope I'm not butchering his name. And he's not alone in this preaching of Greater Israel. There are many, actually. For example, we have Rabbi Avi Lipkin. He was part of the IDF, basically, again. And he is very open about the Greater Israel project in this case. And he mentions the Kurds in this case. He mentions the Kurdistan neighborhood with the Greater Israel project. Take a look.
But what I'm saying is, I believe eventually our borders will extend from Lebanon to the Great Desert, which is Saudi Arabia, and then from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates. And who's on the other side of the Euphrates? The Kurds. And the Kurds are our friends. So we have the Mediterranean behind us, the Kurds in front of us, Lebanon, which really needs the umbrella of protection of Israel. And then we're going to take, I believe we're going to take Mecca, Medina, and Mount Sinai and purify those places.
They want to purify these places. I don't know what's the take of the Saudis when they watch such videos of Zionist theorists and rabbis, and basically he was also from the IDF calling for the occupation of Mecca and Al-Medina. Are they okay with it? And does Lebanon really needs a protection from Israel? Because this is the new trend now. If you followed the social media trend recently, there is a scripted talking point, and I'm highly confident of it. And that is, the Zionists are spreading this talking point: make Lebanon Christian again. None of this. Look, I'm Christian from Syria, right? None of these empty-headed people who are repeating, parroting this talking point, even dare to say that Lebanon was not even a country. Lebanon was separated and partitioned from Syria by the colonizers. It was never been an independent state anyways. Yes, they were majority Christians there, but the birth rate of the Muslims, first of all, is higher. And secondly, many Christians migrated to Canada. And some Christians, especially in the Maronite community in Lebanon, they consider themselves Westerners. So they traveled, they migrated to Canada, to France, to other places, and their numbers have decreased dramatically. They are probably now 25% of the Lebanese society. However, despite that, they have 50% of the parliament seats, and they have the president in Lebanon. And despite that, they want to make Lebanon Christian again. I mean, it's mind-boggling. But you remember Jerusalem Post, they posted about this. They spoke about occupying Lebanon, right? Because it is part of the Greater Israel project. And this is the article, or parts of the article. Is Lebanon part of Israel's promised territory? So the Jerusalem Post just days ago published and later deleted an article arguing that Israel is biblically obligated to conquer Lebanon in order to create Greater Israel. The article was first posted on September 25th and then deleted on September 29th according to page captures from archive. I have it already in my archives. I saved it, but these are some of the parts of this article. From the Jerusalem Post, is Lebanon part of Israel's promised territory? The Torah verses convey profound messages that we can insightfully extract for our daily lives. Rabbi Shea Tahan, the Rosh Kollel of Sha'ari Ezra in Brooklyn, New York, graciously opens the gates to understand them. The Torah provides clear guidelines regarding the areas we were commanded to conquer when taking possession of the land. So, Greater Israel is a term refers to the concept of the biblical boundaries of the land of Israel as promised to the Jewish people in various parts of the Torah. It is often associated with the land described in the covenant with Abraham, which stretches from the river of Egypt, which is the Nile, and to the Pera River. Pera is the Euphrates. This expansive or expansionist region includes part of modern-day Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. But it also includes Saudi Arabia. It's not mentioned here. So the river Pera, commonly identified with the Euphrates River, is situated in the Middle East. It flows through several countries, including Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, before emptying into the Persian Gulf. In biblical context, the Euphrates River is often mentioned as a significant boundary in the promises made to the Jewish people regarding the land of Israel. If one looks at a map, they will be stunned by how far north this river extends and how vast the land of Israel truly is. While we may not be able to reclaim all of it in our time, Hashem will surely return it to us soon. So, this is the emphasis. Israel launches their war on Gaza with Prime Minister Netanyahu labeling the Palestinians Amalek. And now they are on the brink of invading Lebanon to create Greater Israel. So, who are the Amaleks, right? So, this is the words of extermination are referred to in several of Judaism's biblical commandments, known as the 613 mitzvot. So, this is the part where they speak of the Amaleks. To blot out the name or memory of Amalek, or according to Maimonides, to destroy the seed of Amalek. The extent of extermination is described in the commandment, which orders the Israelites to, quote, not leave alive anything that breathes, completely destroy them. And on 1 Samuel 15, now go to crush Amalek, put him under the curse of destruction with all that he possesses. Do not spare him, but kill man and woman, babe and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Rabbinical commentator Rashi elaborates on this commandment: from man unto woman, from infant unto suckling, from ox unto sheep, so that the name of Amalek not be mentioned even with reference to an animal by someone saying this animal belonged to the Amalekites. So I think if Netanyahu is like, of course, I truly believe that he doesn't even believe in his religion or anything, but he is weaponizing this text to wage this genocidal war against the Palestinians. And the United States is funding Israel's war of extermination and providing them with nearly all their bombs, tanks, fighter jets, and the like, while claiming to be working towards a ceasefire and calling for de-escalation. As I've been warning for months, Israel expects the US to fight their wars with Iran and its allies, and our government is obliging by amassing American troops, aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and more in the Middle East. Now, I also truly believe that I completely disagree also with my friends and colleagues in the United States, those who support the MAGA movement, those who support Trump. And it became really ridiculous and funny, their talking point at the moment, that no, Trump is he's not going to be pro-Israel. He's just, fooling them to get their votes, and then he's going to. This is according to them, of course. This is their talking point. That he's just fooling the AIPAC and the Zionist lobby and everyone. And when he comes to power, he will not wage the war against Iran. However, all the indications show in the U.S. that there is even support for Trump to come to power. I mean, Biden and Kamala Harris administration, they are not better, by the way. They are the ones who have given absolute and unconditional support to Israel. There is no doubt about that. But at the moment, it seems that this administration is hesitant of going into a direct war against Iran. But if Trump comes to power, and this is the dilemma, the popular base of Trump, they don't want the war with Iran. However, there is a big question mark here. If there was a false flag attack, an assassination of Trump, or something huge happens in the US, like 9/11, do you think that all these people who now oppose the war with Iran, they will continue opposing the war with Iran? If something big happens in the US with the size and the nature of 9/11, and all these patriots all of a sudden become, their dignity would be humiliated, and Trump, let's say, is killed, or something huge, a terrorist attack, and they blame Iran, right? Do you think that they will oppose this war? No. They will all gather under the American flag, and they will all want to go to war against Iran. I think this is where we are headed for. Could be. Maybe it's just my conspiracy mind speaking here, but I think there is going to be a huge problem in the United States security event, which will pave the way for an attack on Iran in the future. This is where I don't think that there is a diplomatic political solution in the Middle East at the current moment. This is headed to inevitable confrontation between Iran and Israel, but Iran, it seems, is not ready to be directly engaged with its allies in this conflict, just like the Americans are doing. Because remember, when Iran retaliated, the United States participated directly in defending Israel. But when the southern suburbs of Beirut are flattened, Iran is not directly participating. And if Israel starts bombing and flattening the neighborhoods in Damascus, God forbidden, of course, I'm just giving an hypothetical scenario, will Iran directly come and defend Syria? Although there is a defense pact between both sides, right? Those are really serious questions, in my opinion, that we have to discuss and address before coming to conclusions. Now, the US is not only defending Israel, they want to be part of the offensive against Iran. This is from the mainstream press, from the NBC News. After Iran launched approximately 200 ballistic missiles at Israel last week, US military officials discussed options for joining Israel in its retaliation against Iran, according to two US officials familiar with the discussions. So, the US has long supported Israel with intelligence, and that support could continue during Israel's retaliatory strikes against Iran, the two officials said. Senior US military officials have also discussed conducting very limited strikes against Iranian targets, the two officials said. Strikes inside Iran have been discussed, as have strikes on targets outside Iran. Those strikes of any kind are less likely than intelligence sharing, the official said. The US could target Iranian assets at sea, the officials said, or try to disrupt Iran's military assistance through proxies in the region by hitting Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps sites that support militia groups in Yemen or in Syria. A US strike on an Iranian target could be considered defensive if it eliminates a possible threat to the US or allies, like previous American strikes on Iran-linked targets inside Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. So you see, this is from the US officials, this is from the US mainstream press, and it goes completely in line with what I was arguing for a long time. I said anyone who believes Israel delayed its military response to Iran's retaliatory attack to allow for a political settlement is utterly delusional. They clearly failed to grasp the mindset driving Israel under Netanyahu and his radical regime. Israel launched its quote, war on Gaza with one objective: to end the Palestinian conflict once and for all. This isn't just about revenge. Israel aims for a one-state solution between the sea and the river, and that's just the beginning. And remember all this information and the discussion we made about the greater Israel. This is just the beginning between the river and the sea. Then they will expand to Lebanon. They will try to expand to Lebanon. But achieving this requires the ethnic cleansing of the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. Why? Because in a one-state reality, the Arab Palestinian population would outnumber Jewish Israelis, posing a severe threat to any democratic election outcome. Israel will not tolerate that. If we look closely at the so-called negotiations in recent months, Israel has used every single one as a smokescreen, maneuvering for more time and leverage in the United States. Even as talks continue, it escalates its aggression against its enemies. This time is no exception. I wrote this one day before this last terrorist attack by Israel against Damascus, killing many civilians. One day before, every time I read in the press there are negotiations and there could be some political settlement, this and that, they escalate. This is all the time. There is a pattern. People, I don't know why. It's just I don't blame ordinary people. I just blame these so-called journalists and experts for buying into these negotiations every single time. Because Israel is playing a zero-sum game. They are treating the region like a high-stakes poker table. They are either going to win it all or risk losing everything. This is just my opinion. I hope just I'm really wrong. I just want to read some of the comments. It was predictable. They destabilized the country for a decade only to take everything back. Great Israel under the pretext of security. Yep. The second one, read the solution of Moshe Feiglin, my outline for a solution in Gaza. I will read it, my friend. And the last one, it's in the book of Joshua. If you read the passage from the Hebrew Bible, you can see how Joshua conquered the Holy Land by putting everyone to the sword. The US is completely in line with this. I also want to stress this. I also want to stress completely that the US is not seeking for the escalation in the region. They're not seeking for a political settlement. This is all smokescreen. And I'm very happy that increasing number of journalists are calling the US for what they are. I just want to click on my face because it seems my webcam is sometimes blurring. Anyways, I'm very happy to see increasing number of journalists are facing the US officials and calling their bluff, and because they keep telling us that they are here to de-escalate and find a diplomatic solution, and they don't want to discuss with Iran, and they don't want to negotiate with Russia because those are committing war crimes and they're terrorists. We don't negotiate with them, this and that. And this is, first of all the credit goes to the Gray Zone and for their great job they do for a long time. And this is a video of a colleague, Liam Cosgrove, and he is the reporter for the Gray Zone in Washington, D.C. And he said he confronted the spokesperson of the State Department, Matthew Miller. He told him, people are sick of the bullshit here. It's a genocide, and you are risking nuclear war in Ukraine and Iran. This was brilliant. Take a look.
Go ahead.
So Israel is still poised to strike Iran. And in July, Blinken said that Iran was 1 to 2 weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. So I guess for all we know, they might have one by now. And meanwhile, in Ukraine, they've struck deep within Russian territory several times, as deep as 300 miles from the border. And in that case, we don't have to guess. We know that Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet, as many as 6,000 warheads. And so one of the risks of arming militaries that are striking in the territories of nuclear powers is that one of those gets deployed, and then it could escalate very quickly from there. So it's rarely discussed, but it's important to address that the nuclear risk is real, and it could very abruptly mean the end of what humans have worked for thousands of years to collectively achieve. And us today are very lucky to live with the fruits of that achievement, and I feel like we're treating the risks kind of brazenly. So my question for you is, we often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khomeini, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, I mean, what gives you the right to lecture other countries on their moral.
So if you have a policy question for me, I'm happy to take it. If you want to give a speech,
No, but
there are
I
plenty
mean-
of places in Washington where you can give a speech.
Yeah, but people are sick of the bullshit in here. I mean, like, it is a
Okay.
genocide.
I'm gonna
You
go on
are
to- I'm gonna
abetting
go on
it,
another question.
and you
Go ahead.
are risking nuclear
Go ahead.
war in Ukraine for this
Plenty of
proxy
other
war.
places to give a
It was great. One of the friends keep telling me to answer this question, but I can't really find the question. To be honest, I have like hundreds of questions here, and I'm not checking the comments because I'm just trying to focus on the content that I was making here, praying for Syria and Lebanon. Thank you so much. Our friend from India is always a great supporter from there. I really appreciate it. If you can, my friend, to pose your question again about Russia, I would really appreciate it. Just type it again or copy paste it, and I could answer it to you. And I also want to say hello to our friend Emir, brave journalist. He spoke what we all want to speak exactly, really. Like sometimes journalists should not only be a robotic journalist asking these professional questions, like scripted questions. They should really face and my friend, I can't really there are hundreds of comments behind you. So if you can ask the question again, I would really appreciate it. If you can just post Kevork, would you consider invite William van Wagenen, who has written a series of long-read articles about the war in Syria? Of course, he was my guest 2 times on Syriana Analysis. I was just talking to him yesterday, and I wrote a book review for him for his new book, The Origins of the Dirty War on Syria, and also wrote a foreword for his book, which is going to be published soon. So I don't know if I have to tell this information, I don't know, but I have also met him recently in Berlin. We had a really nice discussion here in Berlin together. And when he publishes the book, what I'm going to do is every chapter, we're going to make like 5 or 6 or 7, let's say, episodes together, few hours, and we're going to discuss every chapter separately of his book and the content of the book and the origins of the dirty war and Syria. And accordingly, you can also buy his book. So I'm definitely going to push and promote his book when it is published. William van Wagenen is a great journalist, and I told him this to his face. And I have become a little bit Germanized here. I don't make compliments, but the details that he writes in his articles, only Syrians know all these details. He goes into so deep into details, the social details, political details, sectarian details, religious details in Syria, that only the Syrians know, but he's really well informed. I kudos for him, really. So, question. This is the question. Why Russia doesn't do more for Syria after they gave them the best port and all the production of the potash for fertilizer? Russia, before they came to Syria and helped Syria in its fight against ISIS, Nusra, and all these CIA type backed terrorist groups, they told Syria they're not interested in having a conflict with Israel. They told them, we are not part of the axis of resistance. We're here to support Syria against this terrorist attack against them, and we're not here to be a participant in the Arab-Israeli conflict. They told it before they came. And I'm not giving justifications or excuses to Russia, but they said to Syria before they came. And secondly, I totally agree with you. Look to the United States, unconditional support to Israel, unconditional support. It's mind-boggling to many Syrians to see the passivity of Russia when it comes to the increased aggressions of Israel against Syria. Russia, in my opinion, just like the Americans are doing, at least on a defensive level, when Israel bombs Syria, they should participate in defending Syria. They should. Because they have also vital interests in Syria. It's not like because they should love us or they should do it for the sake of our eye colors or something like that. They have to do it for their own interests. And there are certain weapons that Syria bought for a long time and paid the price and they didn't receive. So there are so many questions. I think I should host someone from Russia. I was thinking of hosting Professor Alexander Dugin and ask him these questions, some debate with him. I don't know. Let me know if you have a better candidate in the comments below. I would really appreciate it. I think those are the questions that the Russians have to answer, not me. So this was also for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching me on YouTube or on Rumble. We have around 850 people watching on these two platforms. I would really appreciate it only if you hit the like button before leaving this stream. If you find it beneficial for you and educational, share it with your friends so that the Syriana Analysis fan base or the following would also increase. And if you like to support the independent work I'm doing, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you on Thursday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you and upon your families. Salam.